Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us again today for another conversation about product pricing and service pricing. And once again, we have the lovely Melanie Pienaar with us, who is going to share some of her experiences as she transitions from working out pricing for making couture garments towards working out pricing for workshops and training. So essentially, she's going from actual physical products to more of a service-based business. And having said that, when you're doing training, a certain component of a workshop might have a physical thing, a physical item that might need to be costed in. So, Melissa, today, my first question for you is, how has it been in your experience trying to wrap your mind around this new way of working out pricing from a physical product to one that is more of a training and a service-based product? How's that been for you?
Sure, yeah, that's been an adjustment to how I think, and because it's all there's so much you also have to think about when you're facilitating something, because you
Yes,
need a space to facilitate, you need the equipment to facilitate depending on what you're facilitating.
yes,
Where do you facilitate? So it's all these other factors that I don't think I really knew what I was getting myself into, but it's been an interesting change because there's so many of these factors that I never factored in for couture.
yes,
Like, where do I do couture? I never
yes,
factored in rent. I never factored in electricity because it was just, my brain is only thinking on the product that
yes.
I'm making. So it's really been interesting. And now what I have is some of the designers that are with me, and we're sort of going through some of our journeys. I've been telling them these things like, think about, you need to service your machine. You need to have a website if you do one day. You need to have all these other factors that you have to factor in, because that's what running a business is.
Yes.
And it's so weird that it's broadened my thinking as far as where cost goes.
Yes.
And then also, how do I scale it? How many can I have in a class? How many can I facilitate at once? How many times can I facilitate however many classes? And it's been fun. It's been
Yes.
fun. So yeah, that's, I think my understanding of costing is almost slightly easier with the workshops,
Okay. Okay.
weirdly enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there were those other invisible costs that you couldn't face before?
Yeah, that's because I've been thinking about that. Like, why am I now only all of a sudden thinking about bigger than what I am? And I think being a creative, when I remember when I asked, like, how do I cost something, it was purely just labor. There wasn't any other factors that I remember having to cost in. So I think maybe I was also just very naive in when I was doing this, that I thought that was how you do it. I was told
Mm.
that's how you did it. I never really looked at anything else. And
Mm.
sorry, my cat might just come in yeah, there we go. Anyway, so yeah, I sort of just found that I stuck to a formula that I was shown,
Yes.
but I never branched anywhere out that. And because I was so closed-minded in what I was doing, it was just sewing. That's what I was
Yes.
doing. I was making a garment that I didn't think of anything else.
Yes.
Um, and that was and the more I've also been talking to people and starting to understand where the costing thing is, because there's so many of us do it. And then they look to me for guidance. I'm like, listen, I'm going through the same thing right now. So I'm not preaching to you like I exactly know what to do, and I'm not taking all my advice, but these are the things that I've found along my way. And
Yes.
yeah, I think when you're a creator, I think we only evolved, and it's weird, like in our own bubble. Like,
Yes.
this is how long it takes me to do this, and
Yes.
these are what I need to do this, and that's it.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I'm finding that that's kind of where we stick to.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
just the making.
So you've touched on something that I speak about quite frequently, and that's the fact that just using a formula that somebody gives you is very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. So
Yeah.
what advice would you give to people, your students, who come to you and say, "Well, I've been given this formula and I'm going to trust it"?
I always tell them you have to think about what you need.
Yes,
What do you need to do all of this? Do you and I'm not being funny, but sometimes like if you need nails, like if you need to do your nails every month to be
yes,
able to do the work you need to do, then you cost that factor in. And it doesn't it seems odd, but if anything that helps you do your work, you have to factor that cost in.
yes,
Electricity, rent, sewing needles,
yes,
factor those costs in.
yes,
And I just think, yeah, do you want to have, you need to, I mean, it's things like advertising. You know, I never, ever, ever thought about putting a budget in for advertising. Never in a million years did I think in Couture that I have to factor in that I have to pay something to be able to advertise my services to other people. No,
yes.
nothing, none of that. Why would I factor that in? It's wild. So yeah, I think just think about the wider aspect of what are you trying to build as well. Are you trying to build a brand? Are you trying to build a service? Or what it is, and then start understanding what that looks like, and then
Yes,
start figuring out your costing. But
yes,
there's no, I've asked so many different people to help me with costing, and I mean, I've asked you, I've asked, my husband, I've asked his friend, and everyone comes to me with a very different view, but kind of the base level is understand what your running costs are,
yes.
understand what you want to make at the end of the day. What do you want to take out of this? Not that you have to pay yourself in the beginning. And I think when you're in the building phase, use that money to build your business. And
Yes.
that's kind of what I've tried to factor in is what I would pay myself. I don't need, and I'm fortunate for that. But if you need to rely on that, rely on the money at the end of the month, factor that in. You have to pay yourself a living.
Yes, yes.
Um,
And here
it's
I've got to add, what if your circumstances were to change due to something outside of your control?
I'd be homeless. And truthfully so, like I have no credit and because no one will offer me credit because I own my own business. So please factor that part in as well before
Yes,
you start this crazy journey. Um, but yeah, when I did need the money, when I was surviving on the money since COVID, I mean, that's when I left my cushy job and all of those things. So I then had to factor in my monthlies, and then like I'd started living month to month for at least 3 years of my whole entire life. Month to month is what I lived. If I didn't work, I didn't get paid, so I was working till 2 o'clock because I never factored in any of these things, any of the running costs, any of the problems that could happen.
mm,
Maybe you need more fabric. I never factored. It was purely just what I thought it was to make this particular garment and
mm,
nothing more.
mm.
Not a single cent more. I kid you not. And most of them I paid in because
So
I didn't
look,
factor in. Maybe I needed,
that's
like, there's
that's
so much,
that's what
so
I
much.
wanted to ask you. What did you do when your estimates were wrong? And I know you've now mentioned you have to pay in. Where did you pay that in from? Did it come out of your savings?
Well, out of just money that I had. And I would I would never let the client pay for the mess up or for if I didn't calculate the fabric enough or any of that. I would just pay it
Yes,
because I felt I already quoted them. I estimated this. And
yes,
what I've also now done is it's an estimate.
yes,
It's an I can't think of all the variables that could happen along the way. I can't think of in the moment when they want to expecting a quote as well, which is like in 2 hours from the message that they've just sent me, which is fair. We're in that realm, but might have misjudged, and
yes,
I am only human.
yes,
So now I put a contingency fee in, and it
yes,
could go up to this amount because now there's a contingency fee that I might have to use.
yes,
So
yes,
it basically could range between here and here.
yes,
Like I
yes.
don't know exactly where. I'll send you the final invoice.
So,
You know,
so,
and
so I
mm,
really recommend to anyone who's working on costings that by the time you've worked out what your costing should be, you then add 30% on top of that for
yeah.
stuff that happens.
Mm.
And
So one,
a lot of people will go,
sorry.
"Oh my goodness, I can't do that because then I'll have no business." But then maybe you shouldn't be in that business because when that stuff
Absolutely.
happens, how do you absorb it? And who pays ultimately? Because normally it falls back on your nearest and dearest. It will impact on your partner, your parents,
Oh,
whoever takes care of you in the daily world will then have to absorb that. And is that really the one way you want to treat the people you love the most in the world?
absolutely. Like when things do go wrong, or because it is life, life is the thing. But when things do go wrong, or when we do mess up, or we're running out of time, there's so many factors that happens in this sort of very, very difficult industry to be in, as far as the custom made thing, because it's always custom. Um, what I ended up doing at some point is I just always added 30% to my fabric.
Mm,
Always.
mm.
I'd have a miscellaneous anyway, because it would always be at like 250 Rand that somehow need to put in there. And then there's 30% on top of it, no matter what. So like I know at least if anything, I have a small buffer to make sure that if I do need to buy any more fabric, if I don't want to charge the client more, I can absorb it from that.
Yes,
Or if I don't, and I do charge my client the contingency fee or part of it, then that's part of a profit that can go into buying something else, like an
yes,
iron
yes,
or scissors or anything else. But you can use that because that's the part that you need to grow.
yes,
Because building a business in such a in the couture space, at least, there's so much you need. You need good irons, you need overlockers, you need cottons, you need scissors, you need pins, and the amount of pins you need is a never-ending problem. So I think and cost in just consumables, like just factor in everything. I think you
Mm,
really got to have a long list, and like the list can be 50 items. That's fine, but factor in what it takes you to make the thing that you want to make and make sure that you're charging your client for it, because why must you pay for it?
yes,
Like
yes,
you can't be doing the labor and then you paying, okay, it's fine, I'll just, ugh, it's just a zip. It's but like when it's 25 Rand a zip and 56 Rand for a thing of needles, and it's seriously close to 125 Rand each garment you have to spend.
yes.
It's the running cost.
Yes. And those small
Yeah.
numbers add up. A lot of people don't want to go into the nitty-gritty. It's like,
But
okay, this is such a small cost. I don't have to factor it in. But if you've got 20 of those small costs, it adds up to something.
absolutely.
Mm.
That's the thing. It's like it seems like it's a zip and it's this, but yeah, I really once worked out in a year what I spent on needles, and I was like, never again. I'm not consuming this cost. Like every garment, and especially when you have sequins. Now, when you have sequins, you generally always break a needle. So you're breaking a pack of needles so now if it's a sequins fabric, I will charge you for a whole pack of needles because I know I'm going to be breaking this amount of needles on your garments, and I'm not going to absorb the cost anymore.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it really is. It could be simple things that just add up. And it's crazy the price you pay. That
Yes.
was my learning curve. I was like, when I really did add all that up, I was like, sure, so I'm charging my clients that now. Like it's not my out of my money.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of creatives also, we feel that profit is not something we're allowed to make. And
Yeah.
profit is kind of a dirty word.
Mm.
And we need to embrace it because for me, profit equals growth. You cannot
The
grow
only way.
without it.
Nothing. You cannot. You absolutely like. So another thing I ended up doing is I started charging my clients like a design fee. And what that was 30% of the whole of the cost. I think it was 30% of the labor, the cost, and the pattern making. So I didn't do another 30% on the fabric. I just left that. So my design fee is in my head. What it was my knowledge on fabrics. It was my knowledge. It was my time to pick up the fabrics or to choose the fabric. It was my knowledge for the patterns. It's my knowledge. So that's my fee that
Yes.
I'm paying for the knowledge that I've gained.
Yes.
And since adding that 30%, I could grow. At some point, I need a new overlocker, and I actually had the money to buy a new overlocker within a week. Where
Yes.
before that would never have happened. So just by charging that
Yes.
30% as a design fee, which made me feel better, that
Yes.
I'm not, and that 30% is what I truly used to grow my business. And it was not even a couple of months, and I had a little bit of savings. And
Yes.
it's so important so don't think of, and my head I had to like stop thinking of as a profit, as thinking of growth. And that's what I really thought is like, this 30% is what I use to grow my business, and I need to make sure that I charge it because I need to grow my business. I don't want to be spending my time just doing this by myself.
Yes.
And also then you need to start thinking, if you need personal assistance, you might need more seamstresses, you might need all these other things to be able to grow your business. And one thing I've also found that, and I was so guilty of this, is I undercharged in the beginning.
Mm.
So growing was such a difficult thing to do because I could
Yes.
only pay for myself, and I could barely pay for myself at that point.
Yes.
So I think even just factoring, if you needed someone to help you sew,
Yes.
factor in that cost. And whether it's for 4 days, 5 days, one day, even, I mean, a day with help is huge when you're doing it on your by yourself. So I think factor in, if you're wanting to scale this, how does that look as well? Don't think about just yourself for now, because I threw in the gap of, I'll just do it for now,
Yes.
and when I grow, then I'll charge more. No,
And
for
you
three
just don't
years it
grow.
was
When
the
when
same.
you grow, it doesn't happen. And you and you
No,
and
because
you
then
end
you get
up,
so stuck.
yes, and you end up operating uh from a perspective of I never have enough. I'm always in crisis. I'm always putting out
Always.
fires. I'm always having to
Oh,
explain and
and
burnout.
that
All of that leads
burnout.
to burnout.
Oh, crying and I hate my thing and I never want to do this again. And then you have to do it because you don't have anything else to do. The vicious circles happen, and it's so frustrating to be in, and
Yes,
it's so frustrating to see people be in it, because I'm like,
yes,
it's us creators, and it's our self-worth, it's kind of our ego, it's there's so much involved there that I think, and that's all like, oh, we have the creative problem. We have a creative problem, and I don't know how we fix it for everyone, but it's definitely to look at it, to separate yourself from the thing that you do. You're
yes,
doing it because you love it, but you still need to be paid. It's your job.
yes,
Think of it as if you're a PA or something. That's what you are paying yourself to do,
yes,
if
yes,
anything.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Those are such wonderful points. Thank you so much for
Oh.
bringing those up for the people who are watching. I think it's really useful to hear this conversation.
Mm.
So I'm going to circle back around to your pricing of your workshops. Do you
Mm.
know what your break even is? How many students do you need to have in a workshop in order to cover all of your costs?
Yeah, so I kind of worked it out for future problems. Because in my space now, I've got this really comfy kind of situation, so I'm not having to think about rent yet. But if I did, I'd need to have at least 5 people a day, and
Yes,
that's 4 days a week.
yes, yes,
And that's for me to be able to make sure that I can have a Wi-Fi, and not a very big space. So I haven't scaled up yet. I'm kind of just facilitating what I could personally facilitate now, which is not the best thing, but
yes,
it's a lot of rent out there, guys.
yes, yes,
Office spaces are scary.
yes, yes,
but but for now, I know if I do at least 5 people a day, I know I could be comfortable and paying myself a livable wage for now, so that I'm not completely relying on people around me. So yeah, that's kind of my break even. But I think it was, because I can facilitate 8 people in one session.
okay,
So it wouldn't seem too hard to get to, but I think then again the cost of advertising comes in,
yes, yes,
and you need to be able to advertise before you can get to the clients, and
yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
here's another one that I found quite complicated to deal with when I was teaching groups of people is what do you do when you don't get enough bookings to make your break even, but the ones who've booked have already paid you their deposits?
So I actually had that the other day.
Okay.
One of the first workshops I had. So what happened is I secured a place in 44 Stanley. I did the deposit. We started advertising, but we only kind of really I kind of got busy
Yes.
in my realm, and I didn't have time to do any posts, any advertising, or any just like awareness at all. So it ended up being 2 weeks before our event was happening, and we started advertising.
Okay.
And Anyway, so we managed to get about 8 people, and I knew I wasn't going to break even with the space that I was going to be renting. So I just called in. I said, "Okay, listen, this is the situation. I only have 8 people coming to this workshop, and it's not going to. It's kind of just going to pay. No, it wasn't even 8 people. I think it was 4 people. I still got another 4 people in for free for my first workshop. But anyway, so I think we only had 4 people booked. I think that's because I was like, wait, it wasn't 8 because it was only 4 people booked. Sorry. The 4 people booked, it wasn't going to cover the rent of the space, and I could fit like 20 people. So I called them up and said, okay, listen, this is what happened. We got really busy. We only started advertising now. We only have 4 people booked. Like, what is the cancellation fee? Because I'm trying to think, is it cheaper for me or is it better for me? Not cheaper. Is it better for me to just pay the cancellation fee, which is generally like a 20%, or do I just have the event there and just, it is what it is. We'll sit with 4 people, and then so they were very nice. They decided that I could just move my booking and I didn't have to pay a cancellation fee because I already paid the deposit. So that was great.
Okay.
Then I ended up just taking the 4 people and just moved them to my Woodmead space, because I didn't have to pay rent there. So I can still facilitate them. And then I managed to get another 4 more people to join us. I had like my intern join us. I had the people like, that's at the collective space I'm working at. They joined us just so I can get the feel of it. So I ended up finding a way to still have the workshop at a slightly easier location for me to start with, and I didn't have to pay rent, and then
Okay.
kind of moved my dates away. Um, so, but my first initial reaction was also like, should I just cancel and refund the clients? But I was like, but that kind of breaks the trust.
Correct.
And I didn't
Correct.
want to break that already when it's my first workshop,
Yes.
guys. Like, I don't
Yes.
want to feel like I'm completely. So I just leveled with them and said, listen, this is the situation. Do you mind if we move it to with me? And they said, no, absolutely not. I'm like, okay, great. So we still have it on the same day, same time. Everything's the same. We're still doing the lovely workshop, but it's just at a different location. And everyone had a jewel, and it was fun. And I managed to actually just, break even in my costs, and then I could put a little bit of money into my next advertising Facebook ad
Yes.
situation. So it worked out really well, I think. But I think if something like that had to happen, just think about the pros and cons of both of canceling and either maybe finding a way to change a location or to rather pay a cancellation fee, because the cancellation fee is so much easier to pay if it's only 20%.
Yes.
And yeah, and even just speak, and I found just being able to speak the truth of just being like, okay, guys, this is what happened.
Yes.
This is the situation. Like, you know, what are your thoughts? And everyone was super chilled about this. So
Yes.
I think, yeah, instead of trying to hassle too much and start freaking out about, not many people showing, just try and make a plan and have your day
Yes.
the
Yes.
best you can.
Yes. So that
Mm.
that was a fantastic story. Thank you. Because for me, when I was training, that was always the tricky part. Because
Mm.
because it takes so much energy to create trust in people that they know your workshop's going to happen, that they know they can trust you with their deposits. A
Yes.
cancellation is very, very damaging to that momentum.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so it is a huge consideration. You don't just cancel, but that's also why it's very important to understand what your break-even point is,
Mm,
because it
mm,
also
mm,
informs your advertising. So maybe what you'll do
mm,
the next time around is you'll start marketing earlier, and you'll
mm.
say, okay, if it's a month before the time and I'm only hitting my break-even point there, then I need to ramp up my advertising to get there in time. Um,
Absolutely.
So understanding what your break-even point is helps to inform a lot of other decisions around what you're doing. So if you don't know what your break-even is, then you can be running into a lot of trouble without even realizing it. So I really recommend to anybody who's watching, who's doing costings, you also need to understand what your break-even looks like with anything that you're
Absolutely.
doing. Because it also helps you to understand when you're getting into the green, when you're getting into that profit space, and
Mm,
get excited about that, because that's also something that then gives you new energy for what you're working on, because now you're excited about it, you're not struggling, you know, you're not in that, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to absorb stuff here space, and it just gives you more confidence then
Mm.
to keep going.
Absolutely. Like I think that was even with sorry, with the workshop and where I was at, and I could really look at it from a very different perspective on, and not the absolute spiral, like, oh no one's coming to my workshop, even though I only advertised like 2 weeks before.
Yes.
But I kind of knew where to pivot, because I knew if I'm staying there, I'm not going to, I knew if I could move, then I would be able to make something from it. So I think the biggest thing is to know your break even.
Yes.
It's such a game changing moment.
Yes. Yes. A lot of people are
Mm.
frightened of working out the break
Oh,
even.
it's scary. It's scary.
It's because it gives you a very real understanding of what you're doing, and you realize
Yeah.
close to the edge you're skating every time you take that risk. Um, and this is coming from somebody who's done it repeatedly. So when I used to be a traveling teacher, a traveling craft teacher, the way I modeled it was that if people asked me to come and teach where they were, I would say, "Can you host me?" And that would
Mm.
typically mean they would provide venue and somewhere for me to sleep and possibly a meal included with that, which meant that my costs were fairly low. All I needed to do was cover fuel costs to get there. But because I didn't focus on my break even, what would sometimes happen is I would get all the way down to somewhere like the Transkei. And the person who'd assured me that they had a workshop booked for me full of students would say to me, "Oh, we don't have anyone who's actually booked, but it's okay. You can stay with us for free this time around." But that left me with no fuel to get home. And those were very, very
Like,
sobering moments for
mm,
me. So the reason I talk about this whole break even thing is not because I've done it better myself. It's because I'm
mm,
hoping to save you some of the stress involved in running into these situations. It's much easier to face some very, very difficult numbers from home than
yeah.
it is to do when you're 1,000 kilometers from where you live and you have no cash.
And that's the thing, like before you go and rent a space, before
Yes,
you go and, any of those, like make those long-term commitments. Make sure you know what you need to be able to. So if you know you need to make 500 Rand a day or 1,000 Rand a day or 2,000 Rand a day, know that number. And that end number is so scary. But then you start thinking a little bit, my thoughts went out the box. I'm like, okay, if my little thing, and I call it little because it is only me, would
yes,
cost me this amount of money to run monthly, imagine what these big businesses do. So this is a
yes,
very small number, actually, when you look at somewhere like
yes,
F&B, Discovery. If you look at these
yes,
big, they're not, this is like a day, like an hourly rate at this point. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
so when you start understanding that it's not as scary if it's just you, and like those are the real numbers, because if you
yes,
look at the real world, it's out there.
yes,
And then start figuring out your costing, and don't think, oh, I'll do $400 a pair of pants, or oh, just thumb suck it out. It doesn't help whatsoever if you don't know what you really need to make in a month,
yes,
because and math isn't my thing either. So like that's why we're like, I don't like math. I don't like having to calculate things. I'm a creative. Like that's my realm. But you have to get very comfortable with numbers if
yes,
you want to make it work and make it sustainable, because
yes.
they're getting less scary now. But in the beginning, I hated it. I'd rather
Okay.
just that's what someone else is charging. I'll charge a little bit less or a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like
So
I
dangerous.
found that people just asking, how much would you charge for this? I'm like, how long are you going to take with it? It might take me 2 days. It might take you five. You know, I can't charge on your skill level either.
Yes, yes,
So yeah,
yes,
I think get comfortable with numbers. Just it'll be fine. Like
yes,
it gets easier.
yes. You've touched on something there that's vitally important. You cannot, comparative pricing, comparing to the next person, is so dangerous because you're comparing a number here, but it's not connected to any of the numbers behind that. Your rent might be different. It might take you longer. Your skills might be different. Everything is different for you. So you
And that's the
you can't
thing.
base your numbers on theirs.
No. And I found myself slipping into so many of those holes. And I used to even do this thing where what is it selling for retail?
Oh no. Oh
And
no.
I'd compare it to retail because yeah, anyway, not
You do know
understanding the
that
big scheme of
retailers'
things.
clothing is based on slave labor practices on the other side of the ocean, where people are paid less than a living wage. That's an extremely dangerous place to work.
Yeah, and that's genuinely where I started. I was just like, okay, what do other people charge? Or, more or less kind of guide myself that way because if other people are charging this, clearly they're doing something right. No, they're not. They're doing something horribly wrong because you don't compare your prices. So, and that's why I always said, figure out what you need to
Yes,
take on something,
yes,
and figure out what daily rate you want to pay yourself. Because at some point, you're either going to pay someone or you're going to pay you.
yes,
Someone has to get paid for the day that they're working.
yes.
And I think that's kind of what my mind shift
Do you
as well.
do you think it might have been easier for you to work out your daily rate if you'd worked out first what it would cost you to pay somebody else to do it?
Yes. As soon as I had to pay someone else to do it, I was like, oh,
I should be charging
okay.
more.
Oh my. This doesn't even really cover someone to come so now what do I do? And that's genuine where the problem was. It's like I know I needed to scale. So I know I needed help, but every time I tried to have someone assist me in these kind of garments, then I wouldn't really make enough money. Then I'd have to be kind of sewing back again, and then I'd be working in the business and not on the business, and then these vicious circles would keep happening because I wasn't charging enough.
Yes,
And again, I was comparing to because there seems to be a bit of a guide, not a guideline, but an unwritten guideline of like how much you can charge. Like most seamstresses get paid between 250 a day and 450 a day.
mm,
And even that, like when you start going into like 1,000 rand a day, it just feels so scary for couture because people out here are costing between 250 and 450 a day. So how do you jump from that to like 1,000 rand a day or 1,500 rand a day?
yes,
Um, and yeah, so it is tough um to charge, but I think always think if someone else was sewing it, what would you pay them?
yes,
And then you still have to make something on top of that because you still have running costs of like actual things like electricity and
yes,
the world around you, coffee, tea, toilet paper,
yes,
pencils. There's a long list of things you need to run something,
yes,
to have a studio. There's so
yes,
much you need. So,
yes.
um, yeah, it's so weird. Like if I think back of just how I used to charge, I'm like, no wonder it wasn't working. Like no wonder you were waking up until 2 o'clock in the morning and 3 days straight sewing. Hello, like just shake you.
I am so proud of you right now because you have come
Oh,
so far from the first conversations
yeah,
we had.
yeah.
So far,
It's been great. Thank
so
you.
far. So we've got 3 minutes left. In our last 3 minutes, do you have any parting words for anyone watching this around their product pricing, considering what you've learned in recent months?
So we'll do a quick overview. Um, Figure out what you need
Yes,
to run a studio. First off, figure out how much you'd like to pay yourself every month. Put that there. Think about if you weren't at home. Think about anything outside of your general scope right now. Think about
yes,
growing your business. Think about all the things that you would like to do. Don't think about it now because thinking of everything now is so damaging for the future you, and you're going to
mm,
kick yourself in the bum for it. So I think like I did put your big girl panties on and think about the world as if you were actually living in it. and cost fairly. Don't compare cost. Um, and think about just your niche and your skill level and how you would like to be as a designer or whatever you want to venture yourself in. But think about
Yes.
where you'd like to be and think about your clients as well. And you're not your clients. So don't think if you'll be able to pay for it because at this point, none of us can pay for our own services, and that's fine. You're not going to think about like, well, I pay for this pair of pants. You're not at this point.
Yes.
So
Yes.
cost yourself fairly and really think about what it takes for you to run a functioning studio
Yes.
is what I'd really tell people.
Thank you, Melissa, for your time today. That was a really fantastic conversation, and I think it's going to be super helpful to everybody watching. And if you are one of those people out there watching and you have any questions for either myself or for Melissa around your product costings and pricing, please pop them into the comments below this video. We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching and have a beautiful day.